So as we get into our discussion about the four Horsemen of Apocalypse, I'd like you to keep our video about the Thanos quest in mind. And the reason why is because if you recall our discussion about the Thanos quest, we had talked about how Thanos had undertaken the task of getting the Infinity Gems, but had done it by either coercing or tricking people. With Apocalypse, it's much the same way. Apocalypse, in terms of him gaining his Horsemen, does it in a way to where he more or less dupes people, or he preys on people who are otherwise in a weakened state. Now, of course, with Apocalypse having first appeared in the early issues of X Factor, he always operated with a team. That is to say, there were people that carried out his goals. Now, Apocalypse's, his rationale here was that it was a way for them to demonstrate their strength, to demonstrate that they were stronger than the people they were going against. And if they were unable to maintain this role, he would have them replaced to always maintain this element that the strong should outlive the weak. And so with X Factor issue number 10, we pick up in the midst of the Mutant Massacre. And if you guys recall our discussion about the X-Men, we had talked about how with the Mutant Massacre, there were a multitude of things that spiraled out of this, and this is one of them. During the Mutant Massacre event, we of course had seen that Plague was on the verge of being killed by Harpoon. She of course had already managed to subdue Sabretooth, but during this process, Apocalypse had appeared to her in the Morlock tunnels, and Apocalypse told her that he would take her to make her the Horseman Pestilence if she was willing to come along with this. And of course he had appealed to her by talking about how she had incredible power, or that her power could be used for a better purpose than what it was currently being used for. And with Plague as part of the Morlocks, this was something that really resonated with her. And the reason why is because the Morlocks were what they were because they felt like outcasts. They felt like they didn't have a place. And so by Apocalypse coming to her and saying he would make her Pestilence, it gave her a role, it gave her something, gave her some kind of purpose. From here we switch to a person named Abraham, and Abraham had formerly fought in the Vietnam War, but the conflict had left him paralyzed from the neck down. And so Apocalypse appeared to him in the hospital and told him that he would give him back his ability to walk. He would give him back his ability to use the remaining part of his body. Of course, again, he appeals to the powers that war has by saying that his ability to clap his hands and create a destructive force somewhere is something that would really resonate with the desires that Apocalypse had. And so, again, preying on the vulnerable nature of Abraham at the time, Apocalypse takes Abraham and turns him into the Horseman War. From here, we transition to a girl named Autumn Rolfson. And Autumn Rolfson is a girl who has the ability to more or less to undertake the role of famine. Her power allows her to remove food, or to turn food into dust, or to turn anything into dust. And so, of course, her being a younger person is not necessarily shunned by her parents, but her parents are extremely protective of her. And so, of course, her parents, after seeing her use her abilities, lash out and ask her if she really wants X Factor to come and take her away. Again, touching back on our discussion of X Factor, when X Factor was operating as though they were a mutant gathering force. They were operating to capture mutants. Of course, Pestilence, or Autumn gets very, very angry at her parents over this, so the fact that she isn't really allowed any measure of freedom. And so when she lashes out against her parents, she of course leaves and goes to her room, and when she does, she's greeted by Apocalypse. And once again, capitalizing on the vulnerable nature, Apocalypse says that he can give her a place, that he can give her the power that she needs to get revenge on her parents if that's what she wants to do. And so again, taking her as his third horseman, he transforms her into Famine. Now with Angel, it's a little more complicated here. Angel has a more in-depth story in terms of how it was that he had become the Horseman Death, and it actually stretches over several comics. With Angel, we of course had seen him fighting against the Marauders during the Mutant Massacre event, but his conflict with Harpoon had damaged his wings. This of course was the first time we had seen Thor appear, when Thor had found him pinned to a wall with his wings having been damaged. But over the course of the Mutant Massacre, and after the Mutant Massacre event was over, it got to a point whereby Angel's wings had to be removed. Of course, his wings were effectively dying, but because they were dying, they were also contracting gangrene. And of course, Jean Grey Drake had informed Warren Worthington that he would lose the use of his wings, and then eventually Warren Worthington wakes up to find that his wings are gone entirely. Now, there are a couple other things that take place here. We, of course, had seen that Cameron Hodge had tried to kill Warren Worthington on several occasions, but eventually Warren Worthington wakes up in the celestial spaceship of Apocalypse, and Apocalypse says that he can give him back his ability to use his wings. He can give him back what it is that he desires most, but only if he undertakes the mantle of being the Horseman Death. Of course, what Apocalypse also does here is he pits all four of the Horsemen against each other in a conflict. And again, for Apocalypse, this is touching back on the idea that the strong are the ones that should survive, and the weak should be the ones to perish. And so what he says here is that the person who is able to defeat all of the other Horsemen will in turn be their leader. And with Angel having received prodigious training at the hands of the other X-Men, as well as alongside X-Factor, and in addition to Charles Xavier, is the one who comes out on top. And so Archangel is the de facto leader of the Four Horsemen group. Now from here we transition to X-Factor issues number 23 through 28, and what we see over the course is Apocalypse actually making his move. This is when we see him taking the Four Horsemen and pinning the Four Horsemen out in an effort to assault the city of Manhattan. And over the course of this series we see a litany of things taking place. We of course see that Caliban approaches Apocalypse and tells Apocalypse that he wants more power because of the fact that the Marauders had wiped out the Morlocks, or a large portion of the Morlocks. He wanted to not only get revenge against the Marauders, but also wanted to be in a position to where if something like this were to happen again, he would be able to stop it. He would be able to be more than a person who can simply just track down mutants. Now, what Apocalypse does here is he doesn't actually make Caliban a horseman. What he does is simply call Caliban his Hellhound, meaning that he puts Caliban's ability to track down mutants to his own use. Now, what we see over the course of issues number 23 through 28 are several things. The first thing we'll see is, of course, that the Horsemen are battling X-Factor in the skies above Manhattan, but we also see that Apocalypse basically wipes out a huge portion of Manhattan when his ship crashes into the city, which leads to almost countless deaths, millions of people being injured, as well as multiple fatalities. And so over the course of this conflict, Plague is encountered, or I guess Pestilence is encountered by Power Pack, who of course were fighting alongside X-Factor in an attempt to keep the damage at a minimal. But during the conflict with Power Pack, Pestilence is knocked off her horse, and when she is, she's killed. And so what this does is it allows Apocalypse to in turn make Caliban the Horseman Pestilence. Now this doesn't happen until the end of this run, until the end of issue number 28, but what we also see is that with issue number 25, Archangel believes that he's killed Iceman. And the way this happens is that, of course, the X-Men doing battle with Archangel are also attempting to get him to regain his bearings, attempting to get him to re-understand who he is as a person and to escape the brainwashing of Apocalypse. Archangel, being so entrenched in this brainwashing, fails to understand what they're saying. But when Bobby Drake makes an ice statue of himself, of course, Warren Worthington attacks it and breaks it in half. And this sends him into a mentally deranged state where he feels like he's killed one of his closest friends and a member of the X-Men team. And so what Archangel does is he immediately turns against Apocalypse. He realizes that Apocalypse has turned him into a perversion of his former self. Now, of course, Archangel doesn't have the ability to overcome Apocalypse. His power just isn't that vast. But what this does is it allows Warren Worthington to leave the confines of Apocalypse and to in turn make his own way and come to his own understanding, and I guess regain his bearings of who he is as a person. Now, this is a very important moment in the history of the Horsemen, and the reason why is because with Archangel being the Horseman Death, when he leaves, there won't be another Horseman Death for quite some time. Now, from here, we transition to the Incredible Hulk, to issues number 455 to 457. And with these stories, what we get is that we pick up with the Incredible Hulk with Bruce Banner after the events of the Onslaught saga. And so, of course, we have the Heroes Reborn universe and different things like that. But for the most part, there were a lot of different things taking place. There were a lot of different things going on, and so we're not necessarily going to get too far into that. But what we have here is a situation whereby the Incredible Hulk is haunted by both the ghost of his dead father, as well as the ability to draw off the power of the Heroes Reborn universe, which is Marvel's way of explaining how it is that the Incredible Hulk has more enhanced abilities than he previously did. But what Apocalypse does here, and what I consider to be one of the more well-crafted stories, is he gives us an event on two fronts. The first thing he does is he sets the seeds for what will later become the basis of the storyline called the 12, a situation in which Apocalypse goes to gather a multitude of various mutants for the purpose of giving himself the ability to be on par with the Celestials. What Apocalypse tells us here in these issues of the Incredible Hulk is that the Celestials are returning, and because the Celestials are returning, they're going to expect, I guess, payments from Apocalypse. But because Apocalypse isn't going to be able to provide them with what it is that he wants, what he wants to do is he wants to turn the Incredible Hulk into his Horseman War. And if the Incredible Hulk is as powerful or more powerful than Apocalypse, and he will be able to aid Apocalypse in staving off the attempts of the Celestials to most likely invoke their wrath against Apocalypse. And so what Apocalypse does is he goes to the Incredible Hulk. He effectively kidnaps him in the middle of a conflict when he's tearing up the Xavier Institute. And what he reveals, I guess, to the Incredible Hulk is what Apocalypse considers his weakness. Apocalypse tells the Incredible Hulk that the problem is he's very easily manipulated, that he's just not very intelligent. And because he's not very intelligent, his mind is I guess open to psychic probes, but more so than that Betty Ross is really the Achilles heel of his existence. That while Betty Ross has the capability, if injured, to send the Incredible Hulk into an enraged state that would make him a formidable threat to any, or I guess to all but the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, Betty Ross is also the one person that the Incredible Hulk cares about the most. And so she is his weakness. And so what he tells the Incredible Hulk is that he can remove that weakness. He can put the Incredible Hulk in a place to where no one can take advantage of him. And so the Incredible Hulk decides to go through with this. But with the Incredible Hulk, it seems to us as the reader that he might have some underlying motivation here. The motivation being escaping the haunting element of his father within his mind. And so what Apocalypse does is he pits the Incredible Hulk against a group called the New World Order. Now, the New World Order is exactly what it sounds like. It's an organization very similar to Advanced Idea Mechanics, a group that wants to more or less take over the world. And so what the New World Order does is, in response to this, they send two people. The first person they send is the Absorbing Man, and the second person is the Juggernaut. Now, with the Absorbing Man, of course, we see that almost immediately after he arrives, he's defeated by the Incredible Hulk, when the Incredible Hulk catches their attention by picking up a pyramid and throwing it at him. But what we see when the Juggernaut arrives here is that the Juggernaut is initially able to go toe-to-toe with the Incredible Hulk, that he's able to physically match the Incredible Hulk and, in fact, overpower the Incredible Hulk. But then, after a short time, the Incredible Hulk is able to stop the Juggernaut in his tracks. And this is a very big moment in Marvel Comics, and the reason why is because up until this point, it was always believed that Juggernaut was unstoppable, that once the Juggernaut started moving, that no one could stop him. And so this showed us just how far the Incredible Hulk's power went when the augmentations were made at the hands of Apocalypse. And so over the course of these comics, we also see that Rick Jones, that one of the closest friends of the Incredible Hulk, is alongside Absorbing Man and Janice and a couple other people as this conflict is taking place. But when the Incredible Hulk and Juggernaut arrive in Cairo and they begin fighting each other within the city of Cairo, Rick Jones tries to stop them. And in the process, the Incredible Hulk attacks Rick Jones. Now, it's at this moment the Incredible Hulk realizes what's going on here. Of course, the haunting figure of his father returns despite the fact that the shrapnel within his head had been removed, which had spurned a lot of these things. But what we also see is the Incredible Hulk regaining his sanity, stripping away the armor from his body that Apocalypse had given him, the augmentations that Apocalypse had given him, and then going about his own business to try to figure out what it is that he needs to do. Now, from here, we transition to Wolverine, to the events that are prior to and during the 12. Now, again, the 12 was a circumstance whereby Apocalypse had gathered various mutants, 12 mutants, all of whom represented different aspects of reality for the most part. Think of it as a mutant version of the Infinity Gems. And what he wants to do is he wants to channel their powers directly into the living monolith. And the living monolith will in turn channel those energies directly into Apocalypse, which will imbue him with the ability to recreate any facet of anything, to in effect, to eliminate the Celestials entirely and to recreate the world or the reality as he sees fit. And so over the course of these comics, we of course see that Apocalypse is defeated, but during this time, we pick up with Wolverine. Now, this is after the events of Fatal Attractions, and so at this point, we've already encountered Daryl, Wolverine, and so on, but Wolverine does not have any adamantium in his body. And so what happens is Wolverine is kidnapped and he is taken to a temple and he is forced to engage in conflict with Sabretooth. Now, over the course of the comic, it's revealed to us that Apocalypse had initiated this entire circumstance whereby Wolverine is fighting against Sabretooth. And what Apocalypse wants to do is take one of them to be his Horseman Death. But again, sticking with the most notable trend of Apocalypse, that the strong should overtake the weak, he pits the two of them against each other, and whichever one wins will in turn become the Horseman Death. Of course, Wolverine, coming out on top, is the one selected by Apocalypse to become his Horseman. But over the course of the next several issues, issue number 146, issue number 147, we see that with Wolverine, his brainwashing is overcome by a combination of the mental powers of Psylocke and Cerebro, as well as Jubilee and the other X-Men who are trying to rationalize with Wolverine. Eventually, the brainwashing is overcome entirely and Wolverine returns back to the X-Men, but this is the common trend that you see with the Horsemen of Apocalypse. It's usually the Horsemen War or Death, but with the Horsemen of Apocalypse, either Apocalypse goes to them in a very vulnerable state, or Apocalypse goes to them and simply forces them to become a horseman. But it usually always turns out that the horsemen betray Apocalypse. Now, for Apocalypse, this isn't a very huge deal because at any point Apocalypse could most likely eradicate any of the horsemen. He could wipe them out entirely. But again, Apocalypse uses this, I guess, as a rationale to say that the strong should overtake the weak. And so for him, the horsemen that he's chosen are what he perceives to be the strongest members, the strongest people who are capable of holding their own in any given situation. But with the Axis event that's currently going on now, we see that Apocalypse has returned, that the, I guess, Kid Apocalypse, or Evan, as we had previously called him, has now returned to his former self, to the person that Deathlock had perceived him to most likely turn into. And with the return of Apocalypse, the question is becoming, will the Four Horsemen return? Will we see the Four Horsemen come back? Or will this Axis version of Apocalypse be a different kind of Apocalypse? Is he really still interested in the machinations and the motivations of only the strong surviving? Or is this simply just something that he's saying? We don't really know what's going on with his character. Again, we're only a couple issues into his return, and so we don't really know what direction things are going to take. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.